Hello, this is Andy. I'm here with Warren from Produce Like a Pro. So nice to have you on the show.
It's lovely to be here.
Thank you. In the beautiful Bavarian countryside.
It's absolutely gorgeous, and the weather is insanely good.
This feels nothing like work. It feels exactly like a pleasure, which is why we decided to talk about Queen. And I'll say it straight away, Queen are the best band ever.
They are the best band ever, times about 10.
There's just nothing. It's like, okay, Queen, it's like there's air and there's oxygen in the air. And
Yep.
Queen is the best band ever. There's no question, there's no debating it. Do you want to tell me about why you got into Queen and how you got into Queen?
I think for me it's a perfect storm in many, many ways. I grew up with a father who's a painter, an artist, a sculptor, just like super artsy father. And the only thing he would listen to was classical music. And it was a great upbringing. Now I'm so blessed. At the time, I felt a little like I couldn't relate to other little kids and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They would be singing Shawaddy Waddy and other things in the 70s when I was super young, and then even up to like mid 70s. But so for Christmas in 1975, when I was far too young, I mean I was super little, he gave me A Night at the Opera, and it was the most surreal thing. I mean, first of all, my father giving me a record. Now, maybe it's not quite so crazy, because he had taken this job for IPC, which was a big magazine company, and he would commute up to London every single day, and he would come home almost every night with a new album. Lots of Deutsche Grammophon albums, because the recordings were incredible.
Yeah.
And he would come back with Mozart and Beethoven and Bach and all the obvious things, but he was more than that. He would have Khatchurian, a little known Russian composers. I remember Spartacus. Do you remember?
The movie?
No, Spartacus is so. And do you remember a show or have heard of a show called the Aeneid Line, which was about tall ships?
I don't. I'm sorry, no.
Okay, so they had a piece of music, and it was by Khatchurian, and it was called Spartacus. I'm a little kid. I'm maybe 5 years old at school, maybe 4. And they play the music in music class. Yes, I had a school to have music class. Blessed. They play the music to the Aeneid Line, and the teacher, Mrs. White, I remember vividly, says, "Can anybody tell me what this is?" And all the hands go up. And she's like, Johnny, or whoever it was. She points to Johnny. "What is it?" And he goes, "It's the Aeneid Line." And all the hands go down, except for mine. And she's like, "Warren?" And it's like, "It's Spartacus by Khatchurian. He's a little-known Russian composer from just around, and it was just like, then everybody looked at me like I'm that kid,
Right.
That little nerdy, know-it-all kind of kid, because that's just what I grew up with. I didn't know any different. So anyway, that's a bit of a subtext. So when he gives me this record, it's a big deal. I open it up. It's a white cover. It has a design on it, and I open it up, and in the middle, there's all these dudes with long hair, which I had seen walking down the street.
So we're talking vinyl now.
Talking vinyl. Talking little kid. So little kid who shouldn't be listening to rock and roll anyway. Well, should be, obviously. And he says to me, "This is worthy." It's the only thing he said to me when he gave it to me, is "This is worthy." So he gave me the okay to listen to it. I immediately put it on, put on the big old-fashioned Sony headphones that my dad had probably bought new 20 years beforehand, and just listened to side 1 for 2 weeks before I even turned it over. Before I even discovered Prophet's Song and Bohemian Rhapsody,
Right.
and everything else on the second side. I mean, to say it was spiritual would be an understatement.
Yeah. That's exactly what I would use. It's a bit cliche to say life-changing.
No, it was life-changing.
But
It's the reason why I do music.
I have a similar sort of backstory with Queen, and that is my family on my mother's side is musical. We're from a countryside village, and everyone plays brass except me.
Which
And,
countryside village?
From Bream in the Forest of Dean.
I know Bream, yeah, that's amazing.
And I wasn't into music. I was a total computer geek and totally into tech stuff and gaming and things. And my family, I was much more like my dad, who is not a musician and doesn't like music. But we had to put Queen on when he came home from work, because that was fine. Or he'd come home and say, "Turn this record off." So I was exposed to other music, which is mainly 60s music from my mum. I got to about 11, and my mum said, "One day you're going to get into music." I'm like, "No, definitely not, Mum." And one day she said, "I want you to sit on the sofa." And we had this, this old, huge music system back then.
Oh, yeah.
And she got out the original single for Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh, wow.
And she said, just sit there right in the middle. I had no idea why I had to sit in the middle of the speakers. And she just played it. And I remember her placing the needle and she just sat there. Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? And it's happening now.
Yeah.
The goosebumps, I don't know if it's the wind, yeah.
No, it's trust me. I know the feeling.
I mean, the movie, you must have seen the movie?
Many times.
Yeah. I took my dad to that movie. He saw it 5 times.
Did he do what I did, bawl his eye out?
Yeah.
I took Greg D'Angelo, the drummer from White Lion, to that movie.
Yeah.
Multiple times, after seeing it multiple times, and he cried.
Yeah. It was
He's
so
a big Italian-American kind of Greg D'Angelo, you know? And he cried, and he's just like, this is why we do this. And it told the story in the way the story needed to be told. I heard a couple of people being critical of the timeline and this and the other, and it's like, really? And these are people that were Queen fans, and I'm like, really? They made a movie that the first time I went to go and see it, it was tons of guys like you and I that were huge Queen fans.
Yeah.
The second time I went to go and see it was like a week later. The lights came on the end, and I was the oldest person there by 10 to 20 years. Everybody was like teenager and mid to early 20s. And then I went back and did a little research, and even before the movie came out, Queen were the highest rated legacy band in the world on Spotify.
I'm not surprised.
Above Michael Jackson, above the Beatles, above Zeppelin. Because they have the songs.
Yeah.
They have something for everybody. They have a production for everybody. Roger was far more aware than they were of punk rock. So, he was writing Sheer Heart Attack. He was doing stuff that was like left of center. Remember his solo record? You ever go back to that? How it's synthesizer based. And the point is like, what makes a great band, whether it be, a U2, a Beatles, a Stones, definitely a Led Zeppelin, definitely a Pink Floyd. What makes these bands so incredible is each one of them could be the singer or songwriter in a solo and have their own band. What we live in now is a time, and I noticed this predominantly from the 90s on, is if a guy was in a band, when I was in bands in the 90s, if you could sing a bit, and like, whoa, this guy looks good, this girl looks good, let's put a band around them.
Yeah.
And look, no disrespect to the 90s and the early 2000s, but many of those rock bands, the only really talented person was the singer.
Yeah. As the singer in a 90s rock band, yeah.
but that was it, wasn't it? It's like, I think the thing about Queen, now just to talk about some of the people that don't like Queen, is because maybe which is interesting because there's something for everybody in their story. And let's be honest, the thing that resonates at the moment is like in our very progressive world is Freddie Mercury's story. There you've got a guy that is a gay refugee, essentially.
Yeah.
He's chased from one country to another through his religious belief. And he has to assimilate. And what an amazing story. An incredible story. And then he becomes inarguably, everybody I know, considered to be the greatest singer of all time, rock singer.
Yeah.
I remember Pavarotti being interviewed on PBS when I first moved to America, and the person interviewing said, who would you consider to be the greatest rock singer of all time, outside of his genre? And he goes, well, obviously Freddie Mercury. Now we just have to think who can come second. And that was his response, like that.
It is the answer.
And that was like 96 when I first moved to America. It wasn't like, let me think about that, it's probably Freddie Mercury. He just responded like, well, Freddie Mercury's obviously the greatest rock singer of all time. Now, who else can we put close to it?
Because it's not a fair competition. So he's so number one, he has his own list. It's just, okay, Freddie, now let's argue about the others. That's absolutely right. We talked before we started shooting about favourite Queen songs. And again, the answer is Bohemian Rhapsody.
But it changes.
I don't need to ask you.
Yeah.
But again, that's like, okay, that's Bohemian Rhapsody. Now, what are the other ones?
Yeah, exactly.
So, what are the other ones?
The other ones change daily. It's interesting though because I had, obviously Night at the Opera had such a profound effect. It could be Death on Two Legs. It's got to be Love of My Life. It's got to always.
The Wembley '86 performance.
Unbelievable. There's so much we're so down on ourselves as human beings that we forget we are capable of really good things and of great things, and we have humanity and we have this stuff, and that is what great music does to me. And so when you talk about like other songs other than Bohemian Rhapsody, Death on Two Legs, when I'm feeling vitriolic, I can listen to that song. You know, I've worked with many managers that they're talking about. It wasn't so much their manager, that was a production deal that they were in, and they were getting, I can't think of a polite word, just screwed. They were getting screwed, and that happens a lot. Lots of bands have that same experience. It was contractually obliged to what happened, but you know, they were signed to somebody who was signed to a label, so the money was being filtered, and that was just what it was. The guy wasn't being a bad guy, it was just a bad deal. But I get it, and I get the frustration of having success, of them being like on top of the pops and then not being able to pay your rent. And what was unique about Queen, of course, is they took that classical and very sort of British sensibility. Maybe sometimes it seems analytical, but I also like that. I like guttural music. Mm-hmm. I like Plastic Ono Band by John Lennon, which was Primal Scream. Yeah. I love listening to, Isolation. Don't expect you to understand. I love hearing that, and then I can listen to Is This the Real Life?
But don't you think that comes from the power of having no fear? Because just this is what I want to do. I'm feeling this way. Yeah. I want to express that through music. I have the balls to lay it down on the track or just to play it. Yep. And without putting modern music against, I'm going to call it classic music because it is. People don't take so many risks anymore.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because when we got into the car, I was thinking to myself whether we were going to get into this kind of conversation, because I'm friends with a lot of modern writers and producers, some of which are massively successful. And they will tell you, you get into a session, and I've done them, you're sitting there with your laptop open, you've got Spotify charts, and you're playing what you're trying to compete with. So I've made this argument and had this discussion many, many times about play something from like 2010 that's like an EDM pop dance track, and now play 2019, nearly 10 years later, and it's pretty much the same production. But you go 10 years from 1980 to 1989, wow, what a difference. You go from 1970 to 1979, wow, what a difference. You know what I mean? Just take any 10-year period, 40s, 50s, 60s, the growth, the exploration, everything is massive. But I also think the Beatles, most influential rock band of all time. Mm-hmm. But a period that I personally love in music, which fulfills, and I've said this many times, fulfills everything for me, is mid-70s through mid-80s. And the reason for that is it's close enough to the Beatles, so people still wrote songs. Yeah. It's close enough to the Beatles that people still experimented in the studio, but the technology was frickin' awesome. It was like the best tape machines, SSL consoles, Neve consoles were all being used. The tape machines were incredible. You had the Studer A80, like the Mark II is Songs in the Key of Life. It's everything. It's like all of these records that we love. So the quality was amazing. It was a confluence of everything. Musicianship was still prided. People still cared about being really good.
The rock star was still alive. Yep.
But it was everything all nicely hit.
It was.
You got one.
And that's
end.
Queen. That's those
Queen.
years.
Yeah, it's tough because music is still insanely important. But it's when we were kids and before, it was one of the only real forms of entertainment. Yeah. Now it has to compete. It has to compete with everything. It has to compete with video games, obviously. I mean, that's a really stupidly obvious thing to say. But everything, your cell phone, it doesn't matter what it is. We've got all of these little things that we use, It's absolutely crazy. I think that's another reason why we love the band, is because, yes, like we're talking about this, as your father said more succinctly, and I'm saying, there's a song for everybody. And once you get drawn in from that song, whether it be We Are the Champions, Bohemian Rhapsody, or something like Radio Gaga, and even something like One Vision or something like that, I think that kind of magic, whatever era brought you in, it's the gateway drug into...
Exactly. Once you're a Queen fan, you're a Queen fan, and then it opens up this huge door, and there's this massive room behind it, and
no, it's masterful, and the fact that here we are.
I'm going to try and get through these little barriers here. We made it. We made it. We could quite literally talk forever about Queen because there's so much to talk about, and I'm really happy they released the movie because now it's a topic of conversation again.
Now there's a whole generation of people that have discovered Queen, That's fantastic. But more importantly, they're discovering like bands and music and guitars and songs. Yeah. And that not everything has to be 3 minutes long and doesn't have to hit the frickin' chorus in a certain way. You know, I went to Superbooth, was absolutely phenomenal because it has there's a hardware software kind of feeling, you know, in Berlin, and I loved it. Sorry, I've been too much in Germany. Berlin,
yes.
Yeah, but basically not too much, by the way. I love it here. But the sort of synergy of that was absolutely incredible, and had that same feeling that I'm getting from what the movie is doing, where basically it's introducing people, it's uniting them in a common kind of cause because of the message behind, you know, Freddie's story, and we're reintroducing them to real music. And I hate that. I shouldn't say real music because then I sound like the old guy. I don't believe that. That's what's great about Queen. I'm going to frickin' tell myself off, is the fact that they were so open to do anything, just like Bowie was. I don't want to be, and I don't want to hear old guys going, or people like me go, real music. Because you know what? The thing about Freddie is if he was alive now, he'd be doing frickin' EDM and he'd be killing it.
He would.
He'd be killing it.
Mr.
He'd be
Bad Guy.
Yeah, exactly. He'd have a frickin' laptop and he'd have a frickin' guy sitting next to him and it would be amazing. That's what's great about these artists. It's art. But art at its best is where, like, everything is at its best is when you can combine all of the extremes, because The Cure are a great example of that. I always use The Cure when I'm producing because there's nothing cooler than The Cure. There's nothing cooler than Joy Division. There's nothing cooler than like New Order. But all of those bands wrote pop songs as well as being dark and weird and gothic and whatever you want to call them. By I mean popular. That's the thing. It's easy to do the extremes. It's very easy, frankly, to write formulaic stuff. It's very easy to be really super cool. When you get those two little things in the middle, that's a really, really fine point where they just overlap and you get Love Cats. Love Cats is the poppiest, silliest song ever. But it's got so much tongue in cheek and it's just like, and I can just see this kind of like slightly podgy, kind of like Robert Smith with smeared lipstick and like guy liner and hair that's like this. And it's just got kind of a middle finger at the same time. Well, in England it would be the two fingers, but he's giving two fingers up. You know, the story goes, when they asked him why he wrote it, he goes, I got a big tax bill. I love it.
To bring us back to Queen, in the movie, the part where Freddie goes off and does his solo album and says he got a room full of guys and he told them what to do, and you know what? They did it.
I know.
That's what was wrong with it.
I know. That's a great analogy. Yeah, it works really well. Yeah, I remember that moment thinking that was hilarious because that's the energy with bands.
I think for me. I mean, we can get really deep. It's a metaphor for life that sometimes things just come together, and for me, Queen. To take it back to my dad, Queen has a song for everything, and the story is. I'm getting goosebumps on my legs.
I think we didn't know we all existed. I don't think any of us knew that we existed because there was that period of time when, you know, you sort of almost felt like you were ashamed to admit that they were the main reason. Now, don't get me wrong, as a producer, I've had no problem. I reference it all the time because I'm looking for great performances from people, and there are certain songs and certain singers that I will always come back to encourage people, and Queen have been a go-to thousands of times because of Freddie, you know, when it comes to like getting vocals. And then of course when it comes to production. I mean, I think the number one reason why I am a producer and I'm in the music industry, but essentially production, is because of that period, because, you know, it was Mr. Blue Sky, it was Out of the Blue, the album, it was Supertramp, Breakfast in America. I mean, give me a break. I mean, that whole period, Breakfast in America is a masterpiece of production. You know, and of course, I don't know. We could go on for hours. There's so much.
But Queen are at the top.
Queen at the top, yeah. Maybe we're at the moment, predominantly we hear overproduced, overthought, overwrought kind of music at the moment. But there's enough kids in this world that are just going to like push against that, and they are. And I hear bubbles of stuff every now and then, and it's just like, so I'm cautiously optimistic. Everything always figures itself out.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you ever so much. This is a lot of fun.
There's a camera right there, so I'm going to try and talk to it while we're driving. I've had probably the most fun I've ever had talking to another Queen fan, and certainly talking to someone in a golf cart. That's Warren from Produce Like a Pro. I'm Andy. This is the Thomann YouTube channel. We'll see you soon. Bye.
I like it. Just drive off into the sunset. That was fantastic. Thank you.
Mate, thank you.